boys especially, I see boys who what they are at 15 is nothing like what they are at 18. I think sometimes in our efforts to protect children, we are grossly undermining their development to protect themselves, so to speak. What they don't always see is that the dividend is who they're becoming.
This is Rooted by the River, an SRC parenting podcast. None of us have parenting figured out, but I'm so glad you're coming on this journey. A journey to grow as parents while we raise and disciple our children. Rooted by the River is here to equip your family to root deep in the living waters of Jesus and his love. I'm John Homas, the family pastor at Spanish River Church. Welcome to season 2 of Rooted by the River. I am really excited about continuing this journey with you. There's a new feature that'll be on each episode of the podcast. At the end of the interview, after the interview's over, I'll be sticking around to give a few parenting takeaways for you so that you can maximize what you learn in each episode. We'll be talking about some best practices that we learn from each of our guests that you can apply in your own home. On today's episode of Rooted by the River, I'm talking with Coach Brian Braddock, who is the head coach at St. Augustine High in North Florida. Now, Brian's been the head coach there for 10 years, but has been coaching football for 22 years. And today, I want to talk with him about developing character in young men. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Brian's not only the head coach of St. Augustine, Brian's also my brother-in-law, so it's a real privilege to have you on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Brian, you've been coaching for a long time, and you've learned a few things about mentoring boys as you've been coaching football. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, how do you balance having high standards for the boys on your team with also warmth and acceptance? How do you think about those two things?
Yeah, for me personally, that is a large struggle. I'm a peacemaker by nature. So I want the boys to like me. I want them to look up to me and to enjoy playing on our team. So unfortunately, having high standards oftentimes precludes those, at least for a brief moment of time. They may not like you. They may not like what they're having to do. They may not like the accountability whenever they don't meet our high standards. So for me, in my 22 years coaching, it's been something I've become keenly aware of the last few years specifically as I've been blessed to be able to bring in some assistant coaches who probably err in the opposite direction of that. They're ready to rip everything up and let the cards fall where they may. So we're a good balance in that regard. But they have no issues. It's standard above everything else, accountability above everything else, and I think it's been good for us to learn from one another. So to start off with the answer to that question, it's a big challenge for me personally because of my nature. I've come to learn that the building of trust is paramount to everything when we want to drive people to high standards, and to have the right to hold them accountable to those standards. And it is a violation of trust whenever I say something good will happen and then I don't follow through, but it's just as big a violation of trust when I say there will be a perhaps uncomfortable consequence if you don't meet a standard and I don't follow through on that. So for me, that's probably the place I have to take myself so that I can be, at times, maybe it feels heartless. It's not. It's actually loving to demonstrate accountability or to bring accountability, whether that accountability is good or bad. Accountability is not always negative. So I've had to psychoanalyze myself a little bit in that and ask God to give me strength in that, lean on some other coaches who do maybe a better job of that than I do, while I can also help them see the side of peacemaking within that. We don't want to cut the kid off, so to speak. We don't want to make him think it's us and them. It's a fine line, but what I've learned the most is that the building of that trust is just as greatly impacted, whether you hold them accountable in a firm, sometimes difficult way, or even in a positive way. And I think that's helped me a lot. Yeah. I think that builds safety. Remarkably, the harder I mean the more firm we are with accountability when a standard's not met. Generally, that actually creates a greater willingness to listen, a greater amount of trust with our players. So it's been a tough road for me. Oftentimes I've failed, but I think I've learned a lot.
How do you see sports partnering with the development of character, particularly in boys and teenage boys?
So not to get too big picture, but I think it is a big picture question of even more, why do sports matter so much? Why are they more important now perhaps than ever? I think a lot of people, a lot of parents have been exposed to and have experienced themselves and I don't want to use the word incorrectly, the infantilization of children. We've kept them as infants.
Interesting. Yeah.
Our society does, and we cannot handle an unhappy child. We cannot handle a disappointed child, and it's hard. It's hard as a parent. Like I just said a minute ago, as a peacemaker, it's hard for me with my players. But I think sports, you have built in difficult situations. Yeah. You have built in winning and losing. Yeah. And you can't remediate. You can't get a third opportunity to take the test again. You can't. I will chide my AP statistics students when they will ask me the day before a test, can we have a study guide with everything on the test? And I tell them it's chapter 4. You have a textbook. But then I will kind of sarcastically say to them, boy, I really hope that Nice, when I call their coach, he will tell me exactly how they plan to approach the football game Friday night, so that we can know everything we need to be ready for in advance, rather than taking upon ourselves to say, I'm going to do everything within my power to be as prepared as possible, and then I'll hold my head high with the results after that. And some of the kids, they're used to it now by this point in the school year, so they just kind of laugh. But I think that's valuable. Yeah. You don't always get redos, and because of that, sometimes you really fail. And in sports, that's real. That happens, and I think that's you learn more from failure than you do from success. Yeah. So I think sports are irreplaceable, especially for the development of strong young men.
Yeah, and I think even as we're thinking about developing children in general, some of the things that have projected us as adults into our purpose are actually walking through failure and learning to be resilient, learning to get back up. And okay, Jesus is still on the throne. I failed, but I don't have to walk in shame, and I can learn how to do that and head towards something successfully.
Absolutely, and I think sometimes in our efforts to protect children, we are grossly undermining their development to protect themselves, so to speak. And the ultimate protector is Jesus, but just in a civic sense, in a social sense, and I have a goal, I want to work hard for that goal sense, and a being a productive citizen sense. We hold them back from developing the skills they need to move through failures, because there's going to be so many micro failures, and sometimes there's going to be big failures. Right. And ultimately, their success is going to come down to how they respond to those things.
Yeah. I've talked about this before. My dad, your father-in-law, has said, who's been a marriage and family counselor, has said, you want to try and help your children be marriable, employable, and serviceable to God. Mm-hmm. And I find that's really helpful. Those are 3 tangible goals, but you can't do that unless you teach them how to work through adversity in each of those situations. And you don't get married and it's like, unicorns and cupcakes all the time. You have to solve problems. You have to work through things. You have to hear from your spouse, I didn't like it when you did that. And you have to figure out how to do better. So.
Right. Well, and I think, one of the things that comes up a lot in coaching teenagers, they're coming out of middle school and then they get to high school and things have been a certain way, which is good. It's been different. And then they get to high school and it's a very, very different environment. And I think more so than the child, I think the parents can often struggle with that because it's very different. We're now in I think that's the dividing line. It now becomes a true meritocracy. And it's hard to deal with, I'm just not good enough right now. And that's what happens with a lot of athletes when they come to high school. And I think sometimes there's also there's personality conflicts. There's a lot of things that happen. And I'm very careful how I say this because I don't ever want parents to think I'm putting them off or I'm making small of it. But I try to remind parents that are struggling with that the child, that's easy enough, but the parents are really the driving force in the child's behavior a lot of times. I try to remind them thousands of kids have gone through this. Yeah. But I've seen a lot of them that have been better for it, and I've seen a lot of them that use it as an excuse to become worse. And I try to say that in a very respectful way. And I try to encourage them to and there's even the personal side of things. Well, maybe they just don't connect with this position coach, or they just don't get along with the way that in the weight room your coach administers the standards. And so, wow, what an opportunity for them to develop a lifelong skill then. Yeah. Because they're gonna have a spouse that one day they look at and go, I didn't know you thought that. I think that's ridiculous, and I cannot stand that. And they're gonna have to learn how to deal with that and how to love that person through that. And So what an opportunity they have if they have a coach that's difficult for them to connect to, or a standard that they don't like to have to adhere to, because that's going to happen for the rest of their life.
Let's talk about that just for a second, because I love that one of the things I hear you talk about is developing character in players. And you're a great coach. You know how to motivate. You know how to pick plays. But what seems just as important to you is you graduating young men into the world out of your football program, out of St. Augustine High, who make the world a better place because of who they are, not just because of how they've won games. So you just mentioned a little bit about how you get parents to think about the difference between success on the football field and then life skills. How do you balance out wanting to win games for as a coach, and then also wanting to develop your players?
Yeah, that's a constant battle as well. I've never met a good coach that doesn't have an ego. So you want to win.
Yeah.
You want everybody to know that you're a good coach, that your team's really good, and for all of our assistant coaches, it's the same thing. So it's a constant battle. One of our core tenets for my coaching staff, and this is what I have to bring myself and my staff back to quite often, is that we want to serve their hearts before we serve their talent. And that's not something that I came up with. There's some coaches that I respect a lot. I have heard that from before, and so we've kind of adopted that ourselves. And I think there's a lot of scenarios. That's a broad statement, but there's a lot of scenarios that you can apply that test to.
Yeah.
And the decision to do what is right for them as a young man versus what maybe is most expedient for the football team becomes a lot more crystal clear. Whether that's having to make the uncomfortable decision to take away a young man's opportunity to play because they need to have that sort of shock to their system so that they can make some better decisions to be a better young man. All the way down to just the micro things day to day. Things can happen, and as a coach, it's fairly public. That's one thing about these kids, and we've been fortunate to have success. So it's pretty public if we're successful or we fail. And a lot of people have a lot of opinions, which is a blessing because a lot of people care. But it's so easy to become wrapped up in that, and then it becomes about the kid's talent and what they can do to make you look good, to make your team look good. And it's not at all about that kid's heart. It's not at all about that kid's development. So when it gets muddy, when it gets gray, we have to come back to that. And just like with the kids, I have to remind, with kids, we're like, oh, they just don't get it. I have to constantly remind them of our core values or the way we behave. It's no different for myself and our coaches. I have to constantly, and it's bitten me before when I've failed to constantly remind myself or our coaches, and we've lost our way, that we're here to serve their hearts before we serve their talents. And to be quite honest with you, there's an expediency to that as a coach, because you deal with far less problems if you do that from the beginning on the front end. Your players or it's easier to hold them accountable because they trust you if that's truly how you're treating them. So you can cut potential issues off at the pass much faster. They feel more of an obligation to protect you and the team with their behavior if you've built that trust, and they know you really want to serve their hearts before their talent. So if they don't think that, then they really don't care that much about what consequence. They'll have to just bear it and deal with it. So there's also it's kind of like the shortest point between the shortest distance between 2 points really is the path of discipline. By treating players right and earning their trust, that actually is going to enable them to play better, to play more, and to cause you much less problems as the person who's leading the organization and trying to get them all going in the right direction. So although it's harder work on the front end, it's the tougher challenge. It's actually creates a lot less problems.
I think there's a big parenting application there, for parents who are living in high achieving places or high achieving organizations. There can be this temptation to get the kid ahead. Let's see them excel at the expense of developing their heart and developing their character. So I think that's a good encouragement. Develop their heart before, how did you say it?
Serve their heart before you serve their talent.
That's good.
So it's, and I can give you a very concrete example. You can have an extremely talented player who is going to help you win. And it's so easy to overlook small things because everything you're doing is just geared towards serving that talent.
Yeah.
And you're not serving their heart, though. And then what ends up happening is the lack of investment in the heart will short circuit the talent. It's a ticking time bomb.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the child. It is the same with a child. You want your 8-year-old to be on the best travel team and he hit his home run, look at the video and this and that. And I, as somebody who coaches high schoolers, can't tell parents enough that what your child did at 10 years old could not matter less. It could not matter less. We have now, and football is a little bit of its own deal. That's true. It's not as much of a skill-based sport as, say, baseball or whatever. But boys, especially, I see boys who what they are at 15 is nothing like what they are at 18. Yeah. So the character of the kid is going to serve them much more when they have to deal with hard things as a young adult and a teenager than if they played on the coolest travel team when they were 9.
What caught my attention, even as you were talking about character development in boys, is you wrestling with your own character. I thought that was interesting because it's easy for us to, even as parents, to go, I want my kid to be this way. Like we want to do these things and then they turn out this way, forgetting that some of that is working on the character of us who are mentoring and molding them. You've already shared a little bit about some of your wrestles to develop your own character in this, but what are teenage boys looking for in the character of a man who is their mentor or father?
I think first and foremost, they want to know that they're going to be unconditionally loved and that they'll belong. And then they want conviction. Yeah. They want clear direction. And now those two things can belong to a lot of different types of associations, many bad. So that's why you see so many boys that'll be willing to lay down their lives to a gang. Yeah. And they're getting that part right. You're part of us. No matter what,
you're in.
You belong. Yeah. And we're convicted about what we're doing. We're all in. But hopefully you can find the right type of association for that. And then those are the two things they want. But that you belong and that you're part of us. The trust building process is so vital. And I've done a lot of learning and wrestling and reading and you can't drive people to high accountability and high performance without an elite level of trust. Yeah. So an elite level of belonging, and the first thing in that is safety. Like they've got to know that I'm a part of this team and I'm valued in this team. And then from there, that's the ground floor. That's the foundation. Everything after that is a lot easier. But everything after that, if it's built too fast on a shaky foundation, it's gonna fall apart when it gets hard. So, but yeah, for myself, I've just learned that the age-old metaphor of a bank account, that the more I'm pouring into a positive trust relationship, the better things are going to go around here, and the further I'm going to be able to push coaches and players toward what I think is best for them and for our organization. But in the opposite direction, for every deduction I've made, the harder it's going to be to do that. And I would say on a day-to-day basis, the challenge with our children is they see us at our worst. And so those trust deductions happen more often than I would want. And there's rarely a practice that goes by, a game that goes by, and then the same in the home interactions with my boys that go by, or my wife, where I reflect on it, and I'm a coach, you're analyzing it, and you're like, boy, that was a real screw up.
Could have done that better.
Right. I definitely hurt trust with that interaction.
Right. How else has coaching come into your parenting with your sons, my nephews?
Yeah. It's interesting. Sometimes I find myself struggling to take what I've learned as a coach and what I know is best for boys and apply it to my boys. I just recently, I think it was within the last 2 weeks, had an interaction with my oldest where I found myself negotiating with him about something that he has no right to negotiate with me about. And I can
picture that.
I can firmly and lovingly tell him, this is the way it's going to be. I understand what you want, but this is what we're doing, and move on. Yeah. And if the trust has been built, he will have to handle that. And if he can't handle it, well, then that's an opportunity for maturity. And I said to Jenna, my wife, I said, I wouldn't negotiate this with my players. Why am I negotiating this with my child? Yeah. And not because I'm in charge and but because there's authority here, and this is the way we're going to do this. Yeah. So I was like, I was like giving myself a pep talk to empower. I was like, this works really well with the 15 to 18-year-olds I coach. It's going to work well with the 14-year-old. Yeah. Just take your attachment out of it and utilize it. So a lot of things, learning, it's hard for my wife and I it's not hard for us to discipline our children, but it's hard for us to see our children hurt. And even on a superficial level,
Yeah.
even that's when we remove things that they want, but oftentimes that needs to happen. That's what's better for them. And the same wrestling match I've had with my children. Again, I'm a peacemaker. I don't want 3 days from now to see my child still moping because there's accountability for what's happened.
Right.
Your development as a young man is more important than you being happy right now. And so it's a challenge. But I've actually, especially at the age they're at now, at 12 and 14, seen like, wait a second, these two things are not exclusive of one another. Like they're a lot of times they're one and the same. And I need to lean into that a little bit more.
One of the things I love about going to St. Augustine Yellow Jackets High football games, usually we bring my girls up once during the fall to come to a game. You just you step on campus on a Friday night, and it's Friday Night Lights. It's like, it is like Coach and Tammy from Friday Night Lights. There's a lot happening, but you get this sense of just the culture that's happening there. It's like, you can't necessarily name it, but there's enthusiasm and honor and the fans are into it. And then after the game, I love watching you and the players go, and you go in front of the student section, and the players and you and the coaches sing the school fight song to the students, and they sing back. It's really cool. And it just makes me think about the culture that you're creating. Because one of the things in our homes or on the teams we coach, we're actually trying to create a culture that permeates who your players or our children are, so that they carry that culture with them out into the world. What kind of culture are you trying to create on the St. Augustine High football team?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think to start off my answer to that, I've learned, and I wish I had learned this a long time ago. I've learned that things oftentimes are only as special as you've decided they're going to be, and that's not a cynical statement.
Yeah.
That's actually an empowering statement.
Yeah.
We actually have authority and power to decide this is going to be something that's special to a lot of people, and then it comes down to do you honor that, and if you do. And it's freeing too, because you don't really care so much what the outsiders would think too much about that. And in this context, it would be people from another program or from another school, and or in a family context, other families. But this is special for us, and that's something for me that I struggled with. Fortunately, Jenna and you come from a family where there are a lot of things that in a long circuitous path, how special they were made by your parents has infiltrated into my life. And Jenna could tell you, I still struggle with that sometimes. I'm like, it's a little cheesy, it's a little this, it's a little that. But and not specifically those things, but just in general. Just making things, just hoopla, making things, that's Jenna loves that word, the hoopla. And so I'm not really directly answering your question, but that's hit me as I've gotten older, and I say that to our players.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is only as special as you make it. We have this beautiful varsity locker room. And I'm like, guys, we don't have the rules about that locker room so that we have rules about the locker room. It's because having a locker in this locker room and the way we treat it is only as special as we decided it is.
Yeah.
We don't talk at our pregame. Our pregame meal is silent.
Yes, I've been to one. It's incredible.
And I know.
Let me just help our listeners. How many boys are in the room?
65 boys.
65
another
boys.
10 young ladies that are trainers.
Yeah, and there's no talking at all. I've sat in one, and you feel that if you're talking in the background, you're disrupting something. And it's amazing to see 65 boys eat their pregame meal in silence.
Yeah, and it's not. And I like to explain these things to the boys, because these are things that if you don't understand, you think you're just doing it to do it.
Yeah.
And we're not doing that because I can tell you if you don't do it, I'm going to send you home. That's not why we're doing this, although I will. But we're doing this because this is special. Yeah. And we choose to honor it as special. And you guys have invested so much into something that you take really seriously. And it's a worthy cause. You're a part of a team that's bigger than yourself, and you bring pride to your school and your community. It's not just about winning that game in and of itself. You're making yourself a better young man. Why would we treat something that you've put so much into casually?
Yeah.
So this is, and they eat quickly. It's 15 minutes. This is 15 minutes where there's no electronics, there's no noise, there's no nothing but you and your thoughts, so that you can honor that this is special.
Yeah. That's amazing.
We everywhere we go, our team walks 2 by 2 because we know 2 are better than 1. When one falls down, his brother can lift him up. That's symbolic. That's special. We don't walk 2 by 2 because we want to look cool. And nothing makes me happier than if we're walking back out at halftime from the locker room and I hear an older player, maybe not always doing it the best way, but getting on guys that aren't shoulder to shoulder 2 by 2. Because like he's making it, that's making it special.
Yeah.
Or when I hear after I take roll before we go to the pregame meal, I hear older players put your phones away, leave your stuff here, because they know this is special. It's the way we do it. So I think the culture I want to have is that it's something bigger. Yes, we do a lot of these things because they help us win football games, 100%. But that's just our avenue. And the boys understand that. A lot of our players will go into the military. A lot of our players will go into law enforcement. A lot of our players will go into the fire academy. And again, you're part of something that's bigger than yourself, or you're part of a team, and it's special. Football is just that avenue, and certainly the success helps because they see that like being faithful to these small details, making them special, has a dividend. But what they don't always see is that the dividend is who they're becoming.
Yeah.
It's not about the wins you get.
Right.
It's not about what you get. It's about who you become. And we talk about that a lot. And so that's the culture I want to have. And we have some core values: effort, physicality, discipline, connection. And again, those guide when we're unsure, when something's gray. Well, was it maximum effort? How was your connection with your teammates? What was your discipline? Did you execute in a very, very direct football sense? And then physical. Football is within the rules of a violent game. But again, even our core values were chosen specifically because those are things that in the future, no matter what you're investing your time in, they last. So our culture is one of giving honor to why we do things, not just what we do, how we do things, and hopefully one that as young men are empowered that they self-sustain it to the younger players, not just from the coaches down.
I want to wind down our talk by talking a little bit about rituals. And there's been a lot of writing recently about how in our particular cultural moment, there's no real rituals that graduate boys to being men. And that's been a part of history where there's been these, different cultures and different ways of promoting you to manhood. And even as we don't have boys in our home, we have girls, but my wife and I have talked about that. Like, how do we help our girls grow by using rituals? And you've already talked about that a little bit when you've talked about the ritual of having the meal together in silence, the ritual of walking 2 by 2. But I've never been to this particular ritual you do, this ceremony, and it sounds a little funny when you say it, the burning of the shoes. But my dad has talked about that. Can you talk about what that actually is? Like, spell it out for us, and then why do you do it?
Yeah. So the coach I played for, Joey Wiles, who was the head coach at St. Augustine prior to me, he had adopted this when he came to St. Augustine. There was a Rockledge High School where in Brevard County, where he's from. He was the head coach at Melbourne before coming to St. Augustine. He had learned about this from a head coach he had known a long time, who was an older coach who had a great program that he had a lot of respect from. And the ceremony, the practical application of it is whenever we could be potentially having our last practice, which we hope is the Thursday before our first round playoff game. So this could be the last practice, depending on how the game goes the next day. It is an opportunity for all of our senior players to get up, and really the floor is theirs. They can address the players, the coaches, and there is some fear with that. What are these kids going to do?
Someone a mic.
Yeah, exactly. And it's called burning of the shoes because their footsteps will never be replaced. They'll never be replicated. Their place in our program is solely theirs forever. There will never be another them that walks our hallways.
And you literally burn shoes.
So it's cool because we'll get a couple of old cleats and start the fire. But then the kids, they'll bring like an old pair of practice cleats or whatever. If they have 2 pairs of cleats, they'll bring one of them out, and a lot of them will set it on the fire before they talk to the team. And it's been interesting. Kids have changed a lot over the last goodness, 30 years since I was in high school, and over the last 20 since I've been coaching. So it's changed a little bit. I tell you, this past year, I appreciate it. I've never had so many kids come with something already written or typed out.
Wow.
Which was actually really cool because even though they're not, it is true. Kids are not as comfortable to stand and communicate as they were 20 years ago. They are not. They're not as good at it. They don't do it as much, and that's okay. That's not an indictment. That's our current culture. The fact that so many kids had typed it out already meant a lot to me, because that meant they wanted to be intentional about it. And I think it's a ceremony of honor. It's a ceremony that has a lot of laughs. You hear some good stories. It's an awesome time, and it's kind of turned into something for us. We're fortunate to be in the playoffs pretty much every year. It's kind of turned into something for us where it's almost like a springboard into the finality of the rest of what we hope will be a few 3, 4, 5 weeks of playoff games. But it's very special. It's wonderful to hear from their hearts and to see them be vulnerable in front of one another. Because there's so much less face-to-face communication than what we grew up with. That's hard for them to be vulnerable. So anyways, it's very special.
It reminds me, I don't remember a lot of my birthdays, and I'm not even sure which particular birthday this was. I think it might have been my 21st birthday. I was home from college, and none of my friends were, none of my high school friends were there because their spring break was different. And obviously none of my college friends were there, but my dad invited not my friends over, but his friends over for, I believe it was my 21st birthday, something like that. And I had dinner with these men for my birthday, and they all took a moment and spoke into my life. Now, some of them were the fathers of my friends. I remember that because in one sense, he was creating this ritual, this rite of passage into manhood.
That's really cool.
And so really powerful things. So Brian, it's been really enjoyable talking with you. And
Likewise.
Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Yeah. This season on Rooted by the River, we're adding a parenting takeaway at the end of each interview so that you get the most out of each episode. I really love and respect my brother-in-law, Brian, and have loved learning from him about forming character in young men. It's important that we're intentional with our boys because online, social media, and through podcasts, there's a lot of voices speaking into masculinity. And frankly, many of them are not good. We want our boys to become men who are strong and gentle, who honor and sacrifice for their wives, and who love Jesus with all of their hearts. So let's talk about some takeaways and best practices that we learned from this interview. First, let's zoom out and evaluate your parenting tendencies. As a parent, are you better at holding high standards or creating warmth and acceptance? Now, you can be good at both, but if you had to pick one, would you be a little better at holding your children accountable or expressing delight in them? It's helpful to be aware of your own tendencies and what your weaknesses may be. As Brian said, he tends towards peacemaking. And so he has to be aware of what kind of system and culture he's creating with his tendencies. Because both on a sports team and in a family, you want to create both high standards and high degrees of warmth. Michael and Melissa Kruger call this authoritative parenting, not authoritarian parenting. Authoritarian means I'm in charge, and that's the only message your kids get. On the other end of the spectrum, permissive parenting says the kids are in charge, and we don't want that either. Authoritative parenting is about both high expectations and high degrees of warmth and acceptance. And that's what we're shooting for in our homes. Brian talked about the importance of developing your own character, even as you shape your son's character. And asking these kind of self-evaluation questions will help you in the process. So the first takeaway is evaluate your own parenting style and be aware of your tendencies. Second, clarify the standards you're holding your sons to. I'm sure when Brian is at practice and he sees a player jump off sides or lazily run a pass route or drop a pass they should have caught, he thinks about the implications for a real football game. Maybe that's helpful for you. The standards you have are preparing your sons for the real thing. What are your standards, your non-negotiables that you want to form in your sons? If you need an on-ramp to figuring out what those standards should be, let me give you a starting point. We've talked about preparing children to be marriable, employable, and serviceable to God. And as you think about the standards you're setting in your home, you want to shape your children towards being a faithful and sacrificial spouse, a hardworking and dependable employee, and someone who serves Jesus and his people. One thing Brian said that was profound was, we want to serve their hearts before their talent. Who they are becoming as a person is more important than their individual achievements. Let's take that into parenting. We live in a high achieving culture where it is normal to push our kids towards success. But we should not do that at the expense of their hearts and character formation. Serve their hearts before their success. This means it's not just about what they're achieving, but who they're becoming. Where are you tempted to cut corners to get your kid ahead rather than focus on forming who they are? Are you teaching your kid that they don't have to play by the rules, that they don't have to walk through their own failures, that they don't have to fix the messes they make? That doesn't serve their hearts, and it actually doesn't even help them succeed. We want our children to know that who they are, their character, matters more than their achievements. Third, think about the culture you're creating and take steps towards creating a culture in your home of high standards and deep belonging. With your boys, what can you celebrate? What is special? What should you honor in your home? When your boys work hard and get a good report card, how do you honor that? When you see God's character growing in them, how can you celebrate that? As boys are becoming men, how are you marking their maturity? Dads, here are some ideas that could shape the culture you're creating with your sons. Once a month, take them out to breakfast. Use that time intentionally to talk to them about becoming a man who loves Jesus and being a man of character. Or take them on a special trip once a year. My dad and I still talk about a trip he took me on when I was 6 years old. It was so memorable. Celebrate their achievements, whether it's a home run or good grades or them finishing a book or moments where they acted with maturity. Let them know you see and treasure who they are becoming. These are like the rituals that Brian talked about doing with his team. Also, get around other Christian dads who have sons. Some things are caught rather than taught. As you hang out, have fun, etc., your sons will pick up some things from other men who follow Jesus. A great starting place for this could be to bookmark your calendar for early September and the SRC Men's Weekend. There, you and your son can hear teaching about Jesus and stories from men whose lives have been transformed by Jesus. Last, I want to leave you with a couple resources. I recently read Pastor Joby Martin's book, Stand Firm and Act Like Men, Becoming the Man You Were Created to Be Instead of Who the World Says You Are. This is a great read for dads and even something you could read with your teenage sons. I'll link it in the show notes. And if you're interested in more of a high-level discussion on masculinity, Nancy Pearcey wrote a book on masculinity called The Toxic War on Masculinity: How Christianity Reconciles the Sexes. I had a chance to actually interview her, and I'll drop a link to that interview in the show notes as well. I'd love to close by praying for you as you raise your sons. Let's pray. Jesus, we pray for the sons of Spanish River Church and beyond. We pray for each father that you would help them raise their children, raise their sons with integrity and character. For each mother, that you would help them form love and honor in each heart of their sons. And Lord, we thank you that we have the privilege of raising boys who will change the world. In your name we pray, amen. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Rooted by the River, a Spanish River Church parenting podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, leave your takeaway from this episode in the comments section. If you found the episode helpful, send to a friend or leave a review, which is a great way to help others find the podcast. You can send your questions into rootedbytheriver@SpanishRiver.com. Thanks again for listening.